Hello, everyone. First off, I would like to thank the Chazaq organization for hosting this event. As well, I'd like to thank my brother Natan Gadayev, who has put a tremendous effort to make this night happen and this year happen. As well, I would like to thank hechsher, which is located on Jewel Avenue in Main Street, for letting us use their alcoholic beverages for this shiur. Tonight we're going to speak about several different types of alcoholic beverages. We're going to try to go through almost all of the different types that exist, that we usually buy in the store, in the liquor store. I'm not going to go through every single process of alcoholic beverages. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Kashrut issues involved that have to do with the alcohol. The reason why is because it'll probably take several hours just to go through each process. Let's start off with wine. As you see over here, we have a nice bottle of wine. Okay, this wine is, it says over here it's yayin mevushal. It's mevushal. Now, normally, at home, right, if we have a clean lady that's not Jewish, right, and we have yayin mevushal and she's cleaning our refrigerator, so we don't really have to think of the headache if she by accident opens the bottle or spills the bottle or something happens to the wine. The question tonight we're going to speak about, the first part of this topic, is if yayin mevushal is really mevushal. Mevushal means cooked, according to everyone. We're going to soon see that it's not so simple. The Gemara tells us in Masechet Avodah Zarah that the main reason today we're not supposed to drink wine from goyim is because of intermarriage. You start sitting with a guy, you start drinking with them, wine specifically. Next thing you know, you become buddy-buddy. Next thing you know, you're married to, daughters marrying to sons, sons married to daughters. The Gemara continues and says there's another reason. The Gemara says because of yayin nesech. In those times, they realized that the goyim were taking wine and they were sacrificing it on their altars when they were doing their, Avodah Zarah sacrifice. So the Gemara says an interesting story over there as well. The Gemara says in Avodah Zarah that one, I think he was a servant, Avlet, and Rabbi Shmuel, Tana and the Gemara, they were sitting Shmuel was sitting, and all of a sudden came Avlet, and he took a bottle of wine, and he served it to Shmuel. Actually, he didn't even serve it. He just picked it up and he opened it, I guess. And Shmuel realized, wait a minute, I can't touch this wine, he said to himself. Why? Because I'm going to make it yayin nesech. So the Gemara says that Shmuel said, no, don't worry about it. He said it to his servant, to Avlet, don't worry about it. Why? He says, this wine is cooked. So Tosefot says over there that we learn out from here that cooked wine, if it's touched by a guy, is not a problem. Why isn't it a problem? So the Rosh deals with this. The Rosh says, first of all, the Rosh says something interesting. First of all, the Rosh argues on Tosfot and asks a shaila, and then he answers. First, the Rosh says like this. He says that if the issue is because of marriage, so then if the wine is cooked, right, how does that fix the problem? You still have the issue of intermarriage. So the Rosh says that when you cook the wine, most goyim don't do that. It's not a normal thing to do. People don't drink cooked wine. Therefore, it's an unusual circumstance. When something is unusual, we say that it is no takana on it. When we say a decree on a halacha, we only do it when it's a normal circumstance. The Rambam says something interesting also. Rambam says that the reason why we don't use, or that if a guy touches wine that was cooked, he says it's not a problem, is because when they did take wine for their altar, the Avodah Zarah, they never used cooked wine. It wasn't fit for their sacrifice. So we have here two reasons. Number one, Rosh says it's not a normal circumstance to say, because most goyim, most people in the world, drink wine that is not cooked. So they didn't make an edict on such a case. And the second reason is because they didn't put that on the altar. These are two different reasons. One is the Rosh, one is the Rambam.
What do you mean cooked?
So we're going to get to that. The second step, what does the word cooked mean? What is mevushal, cooked? So we see that the Rosh explains, it means that you take it and you boil it. Boil. Now there's two variations of what that means. Boil means either to reduce in volume, which is the Rashba and the Ran who say it has to be reduced in volume. And the Rosh says just boil. We're going to soon see what that means exactly. Let me point out something very interesting. Rav Moshe Feinstein says that if you take wine and you cook it to the point that it becomes yat soledet bo, which is about 175, he says that's considered cooked. He also continues in other places, he quotes it in 2-3 places, he says in one other place that actually 165 is good enough. Most poskim say that 175 is considered cooked. And that's when you find the bottle that says mevushal, the minimum degrees that we say in order to write mevushal on the bottle has to be at least cooked to 175. Okay? Sorry? I can't hear you. Anyways. Fahrenheit. Now, other poskim in Eretz Yisrael say something a little bit different. They say that we said before that the edict of a normal situation was not to use wine that was cooked. It wasn't a normal thing. That's what the Rosh says. Today, when they cook wine, how does this wine cook? Do you know how it's cooked? It's not cooked in a pot. It's cooked in a heat exchanger, pasteurization machine. One of the end processes in making wine is pasteurization. Okay? That's how it's cooked. The Rabbanan wanted to say that, that's not normal. So since it's not normal, therefore it's considered cooked also. As long as it reaches higher than 175, it's still considered cooked. The Talmud Rav said that actually 175 is not enough. He argued in Rav Moshe, he said 190, a little bit higher, in degrees. The Kedem, actually, the company, followed their Rav, was the Talmud Rav. So whenever it says, according to the Talmud Rav, that it's cooked, it's referring to the Rav of hechsher for Kedem. I don't know if he's alive, I don't think he's alive, he's not alive anymore, but in those times, they still follow his opinion. Fine. Now, the Rabbanim in Eretz Yisrael disagree with Rav Moshe Feinstein and Talmud Rav. What do they hold? They hold in order for wine to be considered cooked, it has to be reduced in volume. What happens is when you cook wine in a pot, we're going to ask questions after, okay? Let me just finish and then, okay. When you cook wine in a pot, it reduces in volume, right? It changes the texture and the taste of the wine. That's what made a significant difference in what's considered cooked wine and not cooked wine. Pasteurization is cooked in pipes. There's no opening. Since there's no opening, the Rabbanim in Eretz Yisrael, I'm talking about all the Rabbanim in Eretz Yisrael, almost all, 90% of the Rabbanim in Eretz Yisrael said that's not considered cooking. Therefore, when it says mevushal on a bottle, through pasteurization, they hold it's not mevushal. So even if a guy would take it, right? Even if a guy would take it open, and even if it says mevushal, it still can be considered yayin nesach. Okay? It's unbelievable, huh? Now let me tell you an interesting point. I was once in a shiur, and it was a Kashrut organization giving shiur, and there was about 70 rabbanim in the shiur, and it had a panel of different rabbanim. They had one from the meat industry of this very elite and chashuv organization, Kashrut organization. They had one for wine, one for fish, different head departments of rabbanim. So they realized that nobody's asking questions about wine. So one of the rabbanim asked, can somebody please ask questions about wine? So I said, okay, I'll ask. I have no problem asking. If you're asking, I'll give it to you, no problem. Okay. Now let me tell you how this panel worked. You had rabbanim on the right side who were the calm, very simple rabbanim, the soft-spoken rabbanim, and you had the rabbanim that answer all the controversial questions all the way on the other side. Okay? Okay. So the rabbi of the wine industry is very calm, very, very sweet person. So he started answering my questions. My first question is like this. First question is, when you label a wine non-mevushal, sometimes you see it doesn't say, it says not mevushal. What does that mean? Because we know, for example, grape juice has to always be pasteurized. There's a law since, I think, 2005, FDA regulations is that grape juice has to be pasteurized because of bacteria. It could become spoiled, it could, people get sick. Fine. So he said it's usually when it says not mevushal, it means it was pasteurized about 150, 155, not higher. And we said Rav Moshe Feinstein held not lower than 165 is considered still cooked. Okay? Fine. Then the second question was a very, very strong question. I said that in America, everybody follows Rav Moshe Feinstein. So everybody holds that wine that says mevushal is really mevushal. So when you go to your restaurant and you say, hi, can I have a glass of wine? So the restaurant policy is that you're only allowed to serve yayin mevushal. Why? Just in case a guy picks it up, the waiter is not Jewish, he opens it and he pours it for the guy, he's going to make the wine forbidden. So therefore, the policy of all hashgachot, every restaurant, only yayin mevushal you're allowed to serve. I said, so in America, everybody follows Rav Moshe Feinstein, so they consider wine fine. Mevushal, that's fine, I understand. But what about in Eretz Yisrael? Now, this hashgacha has several restaurants in Eretz Yisrael. I said, in Eretz Yisrael, all the Rabbanim hold the yayin mevushal is not really mevushal. So how does your organization serve wine in your places? It's a problem of yayin nesach. So he got very uncomfortable. He wasn't able to answer. So all of a sudden I saw that microphone fly from one side of the room all the way to the other side of the room where the controversial questions are answered. And the rabbi told me a very good point. He said, it's true, you're right. It's your fault. The policy in Eretz Yisrael, he said, is that all wines are not considered mevushal. So that means the mashgiach himself has to pour you the wine. Now, when you go into a restaurant, and let's say you're Sephardi, right? And you go into a restaurant, right? Do you have to be concerned about this problem? We know where Moshe Feinstein holds. What about what Sephardim hold? So Rav Adia says that b'diavad you're allowed to follow Rav Moshe Feinstein. Okay? Rav Ben Zion actually holds that it's yayin nesach. It won't help, even if you cook it in pasteurization process. It won't help. Now, the Chazaq family, everybody heard of Chazaq? Okay. Chazaq family owns company Chazaq, obviously, and also owns Kedem, right? Okay. They have a strict policy in their house. I just spoke to somebody who became a brother-in-law in their family. They have a strict policy. Only serve not mevushal wine in their house. Why? They say not mevushal is not good. It's not a really good taste, and it's not drunk by the professionals, by experts wine drinkers.
You mean mevushal is not drunk?
Yeah, they don't drink yayin mevushal. They don't drink it. They only drink non-mevushal. They go out of their way to drink only. Now, many people don't know the difference, right? When you drink not mevushal and mevushal, you might not know the difference. But when you're an expert, you do know the difference. So the Rosh said that if it's normal and it's not normal, that makes a difference. So according to the Rosh, which said that it's not normal on pasteurization, maybe it's considered a normal thing, right? Then it's a problem. But if it's not a normal thing, right? According to the Rosh, it would be still considered permitted. So therefore, some poskim say that this is what makes sense. Now, what do you do with the other poskim that say that it's not reduced in volume, right? And the answer is, maybe you shouldn't drink the wine. Lechatchila, you should try to be stringent. When it comes to wine, I could hear, if you speak to experts, wine experts, they do not go out of their way to make yayin mevushal on wine. On grape juice, they have to. On wine, they do not want to do. They don't want to do it. It doesn't taste good. So on wine, I hear why you could be lenient, but on grape juice, it could be a problem. But definitely, if you are lenient, you have what to rely on. Rav Yosef says you have what to rely on. Don't make an issue out of it. Now let's jump into beer. Who over here drinks beer? Everybody drinks beer? Okay. Now, beer. Beer goes through several stages. Malting, roasting, brewing, and fermentation. Now before fermentation, they want to clear out the haze in beer. Not all companies do this, but a lot of companies do this. In domestically, meaning the United States, for example, domestically, most of these companies do not use a clarifying agent, but it's possible that you might find it. Now, okay, does beer need a hechsher?
No.
That's the question. So it depends. If it's flavored, obviously it needs a hechsher because the flavor maybe is not kosher. But if it's not flavored, does it need a hechsher? So everybody will tell you no, right? So let me tell you what could be a problem, even in unflavored. This clouding agent I spoke about, you see how you notice, you look in the bottle over here, you see it's so clear? It looks golden, right? It's so clear. Anybody ever drink over here apple juice? It has the same color, right? It has the same color. You ever drink apple cider? It's very thick, very dark, cloudy, you can't see it. So the same too with beer. If you don't filter it, it's going to have that same distinct look. So what they do is they put something called a clarifying agent in apple juice and also in beer. And this clarifying agent could be not kosher. It's common in places like in Britain. They use non-kosher clarifying agent called isinglass. And this isinglass is made out of the swim bladders of sturgeon. Sounds delicious, right? Okay. Now, is that a concern? Is it permitted? So the truth of the matter is they remove it before the final stages, right before they sell it in the bottle. They remove that isinglass. They remove it. They're able to filter it out. So if you would assume that's a concern, the truth of the matter is it's not a concern. Now, there are other issues. For example, I'll talk about the microbreweries. Microbreweries is small beer companies that make a limited amount of beer, and they sell it to people. They have a place in Brooklyn, they have in the 5 boroughs, they have certain places doing that. Now, during that time, when they make runs, they still have their equipment. So what happens is wineries that don't have an established place to ferment their alcohol, they use these places. They use their equipment. So you have to be very careful from microbrewery. When you see a bottle that comes from microbrewery, you have to be very careful that it should not be from such places because it could be that they made non-Jewish wine in those companies, and they're using the same equipment for your beer. Pub breweries, how do I explain that? It's public houses, but this is already in different countries, right? It's like public houses, they look like bars, and people just sit there and they drink together. Now there's an issue, there's a separate issue. Let me tell you the separate issue. Separate issues are, you're allowed to drink in a bar with non-Jews, your friends. Let's say your friends are not Jewish, your coworkers, you're sitting down in a bar, you allowed to drink with them? And the answer is, the Shulchan Aruch says in Kufya Daled in Yeridea, it says over there that you're not supposed to drink with them. It's not proper. Why? Because it might come to intermarriage. The same issue that we spoke about before. We spoke about intermarriage before, right? So that's a good question. The original Isser, we said before, was on wine. So some say that it goes on beer as well. The Sfardim are very machmir, it goes on beer. The Ramah actually over there says that beer made out of wheat, barley, maybe we could be lenient. And he says the practice is to be lenient. But if you look at the Ben Ish Chai, Kaf HaChaim, they say you should be stringent. Now, what does that mean? It means that when you sit there and drinking with them, if you just take the bottle of Budweiser or whatever and you take it home, it's not such an issue. Why? Because you're not drinking with them. The whole issue is drinking with them and becoming friends and then intermarriage. Now, let's go into alcoholic beverages. Specifically the hard stuff, the liquor, the stuff that everybody came for, everybody wants to hear about. Now, usually people tell me that they're very concerned about drinking alcohol. I'm talking about hard liquor without seeing the kosher list online, right? It tells you which alcoholic beverages are permitted, which ones are not. The truth of the matter is, if you know enough information, you don't have to necessarily use that list. Now that list tells you exactly products that were definitely looked into, and there's no question of non-kosher inside those bottles. What about the ones you're not certain about? Your friend bought you a bottle of whiskey, bought you a bottle of vodka, a bottle of gin, rye, whatever the case may be. Can you drink it or not? So let's start with bourbon. Anybody here drink bourbon? This is bourbon. By the way, this is a very expensive bourbon. This is it's a very good stuff over here. This is a small batch, means it's a reserved by the way, bourbon is whiskey. It's American whiskey. There's whiskey from Tennessee. It's also somewhat American. It's made out of rye, maybe some, But bourbon is special batch, means that this is the stuff that you get behind, all the way in the back. That they keep it for the hechsher wealthy people, over there in the special reserve unit section. Anyways, so usually bourbon, sometimes it could be blended. Blended means that it has some ingredients in there that might be kosher, might not be kosher. Even if it is an ingredient that's not kosher, it's probably batel. It's probably nullified 1 in 60. So it's not such a concern. The concern would be, what about sherry casks? Sherry casks are big barrels that you see. You ever seen a big barrel of wine? Okay. So what they do is they put sherry in there, which is a type of wine, right, from Spain, and they empty it out, and then they put whiskey in there to give it that distinct taste. So with bourbon, there's a law in America. You're not allowed to put bourbon inside used casks. It has to be new oak cask. You cannot use sherry cask. You're supposed to use new cask, never used before. Okay? What about brandy? So everybody got that? With bourbon usually is not a problem. It's considered actually the orthodox alcoholic beverage because it has the least problems. So that's why you see all the Hasidim in Borough Park and Williamsburg always drinking bourbon. Bourbon is their favorite type of alcoholic beverage because it has the least halachic issues.
If it was in sherry casks, then it was Asian sherry casks, they would tell you all the time?
We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how to read labels. We're going to get that in the end, okay? Now, what about, I'm just going to go through all the different types of alcoholic beverages first. Okay. What about this? This is brandy. As a star. It's kosher. Brandy. Anybody know what brandy is made out of?
It's wine that was distilled.
That's right. It was made from grapes. Cognac, brandy, it's made from grapes, and it's distilled. What does distilled means? It means that they took it and they cooked it, and they made it into just alcohol, and they made it so strong that sometimes when you distill it up to, let's say, 95%, is probably the highest you can get, it takes away the flavor of it. It could become that there's no flavor. Well, it depends how strong it is, but this one is 40 proof. 40% alcohol, so it's okay. It's 80 proof. 80 proof. So it's not 95, because you double that, it would have been, Now, what about Canadian? Okay, let me just explain something very important. Whiskey is a general word. There's Canadian, there's Irish, there's blended, and there's single malt. Now, Canadian, Irish, and blended could have non-kosher ingredients in it. It could have. But usually they are batel. Do they use sherry casks in them? It's possible they do, but it's not so common, but it's possible. With single malt, it's more of a concern. Now, with single malt, we have to decide. I don't know if everybody here drinks single malt. Here's single malt. People love single malt. It tastes very, very good. It's very, very expensive. It could be $85, $65. It depends, Single malt could be a problem because single malt, many times you see that people do put it in sherry casks. Now, the sherry is not inside the cask. They usually spill it out. Sometimes it could be a little bit left over, but let's say it has absorptions, bliot, of sherry inside the walls. And before the 1970s, used to be that when they would transport from Spain wine, they used to transport it all over the place, in England, all over the place. They used to transport it in wine barrels, okay? And then they started bottling it in regular bottles, and they started transporting it. Now, this was good for people that made whiskey in England and Scotland and all these other places. Why? because they didn't have enough sherry casks. I'm sorry, they didn't have enough casks in general. They just didn't have enough casks. They didn't necessarily use sherry casks those times. They had some people doing it, but they didn't have enough, so they used to buy it from Spain. After the 1970s, they started bottling from Spain, so people stopped using sherry casks. They started using regular used. By the way, you have to use used casks to make single malt. Or most whiskeys even used. A lot of them use oak casks, like bourbon. Bourbon, you're not allowed to use it more than once, so they would sell those casks to people, right? And people use it for Scotch, whiskey, whatever, right? So what happened was that with single malt, after the 1970s, people started selling these casks, right, which was not in sherry, right, because they didn't have any more. And the taste, people started complaining, tastes different, doesn't taste so good. So they realized the sherry and sherry casks, right, when you put Scotch in their single malt, it gave such a distinct taste that they wanted to actually go out of their way to endorse having sherry casks. Now, sherry casks are very expensive. They could be like 8 to 10 times more expensive than regular oak casks. Okay? They could be very expensive, bourbon casks. Now, this is a big problem for us. Why? If you see experts telling us that the taste makes and makes the product, right? That means that the absorptions inside these walls are affecting this alcohol. Now we know that absorptions of wine, right? The Shulchan Aruch speaks about if you take a beer, you take some type of a liquid, and you put it into barrels of wine that's empty, right? Let's say 24 hours later and it was empty, right? And you leave it there, it doesn't affect the drink. It doesn't affect it. Why? Because we say the taste ruins the drink. But over here we see with the single malt, it's not ruining it, it maybe makes it better. So if it does make it better, then you need to make nullification, 1 in 60. Now the Shulchan Aruch says something interesting. The Shulchan Aruch says that when it comes to wine and mixing it with water, it only has to be nullified 1 in 6, not 1 in 60. It's a special rule. I think the reason why, I have to assume the reason why, is because wine, once you put 6 times more water, it's not called wine anymore. It's probably sah-keh. Due to that reason, that's why 1 in 6 instead of 1 in 60 is sufficient. The problem is if the taste is not ruined, then it becomes an issue. Noda B'Yehuda actually says, and Magen Avraham and others, they say that whiskey or Scotch improves the taste when you put it in a sherry cask, when you put it in a cask that had wine. Because of that reason, therefore, they said there has to be void. Minimum at least 1 in 6, maybe 1 in 60, it depends who you follow. Now, if we see that it doesn't ruin the taste, that means you need nullification, like we said a minute ago, fine. So how much nullification does it need? So we said that there's a machloket actually, whether it needs 1 in 6 or 1 in 60. It depends on if it improves its taste. Now I'm going to explain what that means. The Shulchan Aruch says that if I take drops of wine and with water, right, it's nullified 1 in 6. What about other drinks? What about with wine? With wine it doesn't work. Wine, 2 wines put together, 1 wine is na'i nesech and 1 wine is permitted, you put it together, it doesn't work. It doesn't void anything, it's still wine. But if you take 2 different items, one is wine and one of them is a different drink, unless it ruins that other drink, it doesn't work. So we see that some Scotch experts say that it doesn't ruin it, it makes it maybe better. Okay, now the Taz says that if I take an alcoholic beverage and I mix it in with water, like the Shulchan Aruch says, obviously it's void 1 in 6. He says even other drinks, if I take any alcoholic beverage and I put it in 1 in 6, it also ruins it. It doesn't make it better. Actually, it could be mevata 1 in 6. Even if it doesn't ruin it, it could be mevata 1 in 6, not 1 in 60. The shach is machmir, he's stringent. Okay. Now, what about how much do you assess? I know this is a lot of information. We're going to soon see how it's becoming more simple. Well, how much do you assess? Do you go according to the whole barrel, or do you go according to the thinnest layer of the barrel? that exposed to wine. So many are lenient, and they say the thinnest layer of the barrel, which is the Taz's opinion. The sah-keh is stringent. Some people want to follow the the sah-keh. But technically, Rav Moshe Feinstein says you could be lenient. Fine. Again, if there's flavors, you cannot be lenient in flavors. What about...
Sorry,
rum.
How is the sherry batel?
What?
How is the sherry batel? Even 1/6. Well,
how do you assess that? A good question. 1 in 60 is about 1.6% out of 100. 1 in 6 would be about 14%. It's a dramatic difference. Meaning that if it's more than 14%, it's not batel 1 in 60. 1 in 6.
And if the contents of the barrel are much more than...
Yes, right. If you assess the whole barrel against what's inside it, right. The question then becomes if we go according to the thinnest layer of the barrel or the whole barrel by itself, which is about 1 inch. It's a lot. It wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't be batel even 1 in 6. There's room to be lenient. What about rum? Now rum, there's different types of rum. There's white, which is clear. There's yellow, which is gold, and there's black, there's dark, which is black. Now the first two, which is white, clear, and yellow, gold. This is, by the way, yellow, gold, right? This is gold. See, they're fine as long as there's no spices and no flavoring inside the ingredient panel. So if you want to buy rum, you just look. You see, it doesn't have any flavors or spices, right? And it's gold or it's white, right, or clear, then it's fine. The truth of the matter is most Rabbanim say that you should buy rum with a hechsher because a lot of them are flavored and spiced. Let's move on to sah-keh. Sah-keh, okay. Anybody know what sah-keh is?
Japanese.
This is sah-keh.
Japanese wine.
Yeah, okay. Now, the Gemara of Vodka speaks about beer. Actually, Tosfot in the Gemara of Vodka speaks about beer. And he says that if the non-Jew cooked the beer, is the beer permitted because of bishalako? So he says that the prime ingredient in making beer is the water. It's composed of water. So since you can't, it has barley, right? So since you can't, or malt, since you cannot, the main ingredient is water, therefore it's batel. It's the water that makes the drink. Now when it comes to sah-keh, sah-keh is actually rice wine. What they do is they first cook the rice and they steam it, and then afterwards they ferment it, and then it goes through the rest of the process. Now rice, if you cook rice by a non-Jew, he cooks rice. Can you eat the rice? Anybody know?
If you turn the fire on, you can.
If the non-Jew cooked the rice, can you eat the rice?
Yes.
Depends. Fire.
Is rice go on the table of a king? The answer is yes. You cannot eat rice. If you eat sushi, right? Everybody eat sushi over here? Okay. If the non-Jew cooked the rice in the sushi machine, that the steam, right? The steamer where they make, where they steam it, you can't eat the rice because it's cooked by a non-Jew, and it is something that goes on a king's table. So over here we have a similar issue. The rice is being cooked, and then it goes through a whole process to make it sah-keh. Now, if it would be majority of water, fine. The problem is, even if it would be majority of water, you have another issue. The integral ingredient is the rice. That's what it's made for. That's how it's made. So you can't say that it's not. You could ignore that ingredient. And there's a rule called aved l'taima, which means that if the main ingredient is due to this flavor, right, which is the rice, then it can't be void. Doesn't matter if it's 1 in 60. If you could taste the flavor of the rice, you have a problem. So some poskim held that it's a problem, you can't use it. Others disagreed, and there was various reasons to be lenient. First of all, steam is not considered a form of cooking. The Shulchan Aruch says mevushal is not considered cooking. Maybe there's room to be lenient in that aspect. Rav Ovadia speaks about it, about steam. He takes a somewhat lenient approach. He's not talking about this product, he's talking about a different product. Most poskim in most hashgachot do not rely on that. On about steam, they don't rely, unless they use other reasons why to be lenient. Now, let's say sake is unflavored, and we know that we have this issue of bishalakum. Rebelsky has various reasons why he also permits. He says that even though it's made with rice and everything, the end result is not the rice. It's really the whole product altogether, the whole process, which is what makes the product. Therefore, he brings the reasons to be lenient when it comes to sake. Now, the problem is with sake, by the way, is that they make it sometimes they can make it on machinery that's used for non-kosher wine. So even if you have the reason of bishalakim, you still have the problem of it's being processed on non-kosher machinery. So it's always good. Most hashgachot tell you to use sake with hashgacha. Okay? Anybody drink tequila? Tequila, anybody drink tequila? This is silver. So silver is not a problem. Even if it doesn't have a hashgacha, it's not a problem. Second. If it has a worm, I don't recommend using the worm. What? Gold. Right, gold is... For now, we say that silver is the one you should use. You shouldn't use the other ones. By the way, tequila can be put in sherry casks. They do sometimes put in sherry casks. Flavored definitely is a problem. So for now, I'll tell you white silver is the one you should use. The other ones is not recommended. By the way, there are a lot of hashgachas today that certify tequila. You can buy tequila with an OU. There are reliable hechsherim. Now I want to tell you a halacha that might be a shocker. If you don't know if the machines that were used for this product are kosher or not, you don't know how it was made. It could be that there was non-kosher ingredients, non-kosher liquid whiskeys and non-kosher sherry casks and all these non-kosher types of alcoholic beverages made on this machine, but you're not sure. And you look on the bottle, it doesn't say. Can you drink it? Anybody know? Can you drink it? So I'll tell you like this. The Ramah brings a very sweeping heter. He says that you can drink it. He says that when it comes to alcoholic beverages, since you're not certain, and since it's only derabanan, he says you could be lenient. Now, yayin nesech, if it's definitely yayin nesech, it's deraita. Over here, it's not definitely. We don't know. And most people do not, today, I hope not, I don't know. They don't take wine and put it on their altars. I don't see people doing that. There's still a decree that you're not allowed to use their alcohol, right? We're not talking about if there's non-kosher ingredients. Definitely then you can't. So let's say you pick up a bottle. Here. This is single malt, right? You're looking at it. And it doesn't mention anything about sherry casks. Nothing. So if it doesn't mention anything, then you could assume that it's permitted according to the Ramah. What if it does? What if it says that it's made on sherry casks?
Would it say that on the bottle?
It would say yes. You know why they write it? Because they want it to be made in sherry casks. Why do they want it to be made in sherry casks? Because it's considered a distinct taste, and they want it. It's a gimmick. They want it to be written there. So if it says it was made on sherry casks, you cannot drink it. What if it says it says sherry casks and bourbon casks? Both. Now what do you do? Now I'm completely confused, right? Which one do I follow? This one, that one. So it depends. Sometimes even single malt could be both. They could do a few years. What they do is basically, let me explain another point. They don't take the same wine, the same Scotch, and they put it in two different casks. That's not what they do. They take two different Scotches from two different casks, and they mix it together. It's blended. They put it together. Now, even single malt, which says it's only made from barley, right, or malt, whatever, right, or rye, it's really coming from the same distillery, right, where they're making this alcoholic beverage, and it's coming from the same grains. When it's blended whiskey, for example, Johnny Walker is a blend of different types of whiskey. I don't know if you were familiar, not just single malt, it could be single malt. It could be made from corn, it could be made from rye, it could be made from several different mixtures, okay, from several different companies in a blend to give it that distinct Johnny Walker taste, okay? So if you have a bunch of different types, right, blended, right, if you have a bunch of different types, most of them are not used for sherry casks, you could believe you could drink those. Again, if I pick up a bottle of whiskey, right, and it says blended on it. Well, this is not whiskey, but if I pick up a bottle of whiskey and it says blended on it. Here, a blend, actually this is blend. Okay? So, can I drink it? So the answer is, can you drink it? What do you guys think? Right, why? Because the Ramah says we're not sure. So you could believe if it's a sah-keh. Right? And he says even more. The Ramah says that even if there's one company in the world, this is a very dramatic halacha, if there's one company in the world that does not use non-kosher, they always use everything as kosher, meaning that they don't use sherry casks, they don't use anything non-kosher, you could trust that it's coming from probably that place. Even though 99% everybody else is doing it. It's a very far, now let me tell you something. If they would make a kosher list based on that, every single alcoholic beverage would be probably permitted unless it says 100% sherry cask on the bottle. Okay? Now, is a hashgacha allowed to rely on that? So, I'll tell you the truth, this shiur is made really for laymen. It's not made for mashgiachs. It's good to know for mashgiach. It's not made for restaurants because a restaurant is not supposed to, sell or advertise bottles that have maybe non-kosher ingredients in it. It's not proper. That's why they have a kosher list. Those kosher lists is products that definitely don't have any questions in kashrut. Understood? So these are cases where we're talking about when you're not sure. When you're not sure, right, you can be lenient. Now, Maran Shulchan Aruch is more machmir. He says technically you shouldn't be lenient, but whenever you look in a bottle, it's very simple. I'm going to make it very simple right now. Guys, listen to me. You take the bottle in front of you. If it doesn't mention anything about, hopefully you get the papers, and I made handouts. If it doesn't mention anything about sherry casks, doesn't mention that it was matured in any type of sherry cask, doesn't mention anything about wine. There are other words that are used to mention that signify wine. If you look in the handouts that I gave out, you'll see over there. Hopefully you'll get them. You could email it to you if you want. You could assume that it's probably not. It's not a problem. What about vodka? Who drinks over here vodka? Everybody drinks vodka over here, right? The Sephardi community, Bukharan community, they love, right? They drink vodka. So unflavored vodka in domestic, meaning over here in America, it's not a problem. There's a law in America that you're not allowed to put glycerin, which is not kosher fat of a pig, whatever, or not kosher substance. You're not allowed to put it in vodka in America. Out of country, you can. Same applies to tequila. They could put, out of country.
Why
Okay.
do you put glycerin? What is this?
Glycerin is for mouthfeel. We're going to talk about that in a minute, what that means. Now, vodka, it could be made from dairy, lactose.
Vodka?
Yes. It could also be made from grapes. In France, certain places in France, they use lactose. They have their reasons that it gives us a very interesting taste as well. I'm not talking about non-flavored. I'm not talking about flavored. I'm talking about non-flavored. Now, when you distill vodka up to 95%, when you distill it, it loses its taste. You should know. It's very interesting to know. They don't age vodka in casks. It's not made that way. When you buy a bottle of vodka, here. Everybody knows what vodka means, right? Voda. So it stands for voda, vodka. It's not. I hope it's not our water. Then we'll be in trouble. But yeah, This one's from Russia. It has a hechsher. It's supposed to have a. All right, this one's from Russia. So if it comes from if it comes from a different country, you have to check the panel to see if there's any if there's any questionable ingredients. If there's a questionable ingredient, not recommended.
It could be miladic then, you're saying, if it has lactose.
It could be dairy, but it could be dairy, yes. Dairy is one issue. Another issue is if it's coming from a kosher animal, which makes it treif. Now, the truth of the matter is, since it's lactose, it's only d'Rabbanan. So we said before, the Ramah says if you're not sure, you can be lenient. So since it doesn't say, you can be lenient. A lot of people don't want to rely on that. They say better to find out. A lot of places in Russia and France and Australia and New Zealand and all these other places, a lot of them do have certification on these type of alcoholic beverages. Okay, questions? Anybody have questions? Yes.
If it has alcohol in it, why did anything need to be pasteurized? Because the alcohol would have killed the bacteria. Pasteurization originally wasn't.
For wine? You mean for wine?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, it's a good question, and the answer is you're right. You don't need pasteurization. That's one of the points that the experts say, that wine does not need to be pasteurized. It's being done specifically for Jewish people to be considered cooked. Wine is not distilled. It's only fermented. But
So if you buy a wine that's not kosher, it was not pasteurized.
well, unless it says it's pasteurized, it's not pasteurized, yes. If it's not kosher, then you can't drink it anyway. It's made by non-Jews,
No,
right?
I just had to understand.
Right. Any other questions?
You were saying that if Goy pours wine for a Jewish person, you can't drink it, right?
If it's cooked wine, according to the guidelines of Rav Moshe Feinstein, right? Then according to Ashkenazim, it's okay. According to some Ashkenazi Rabbanim in Eretz Yisrael, it's not okay. It's still considered a problem. According to Sfardim, Rav Adia says you could be lenient, and you could drink the wine anyway as long as it's cooked. If it's not cooked, you cannot drink it. Because we say that once you pour wine that's not cooked, it's not mevushal, it's considered that maybe he had intention to sacrifice it on the altar, and therefore you're not allowed to drink his wine.
You can't even touch the wine, right? At all. The bottle.
When it means touching, it doesn't mean the bottle. No, it doesn't mean, people make a mistake. They think touching means going like this. That's not what it means. It means that you open it, you take your finger, you stick it into the wine. That's what touching. This does not mean touching. If your guy comes and he goes like this, he goes like this. If it's closed like this, he goes like this, it's not a problem. If it's open and he goes like this, right, and it shakes, that's a problem. That can be a problem. That is a problem.
Why?
Okay? Shikshuk is also, we say, is a problem. What?
Why is that?
We say that his action, his power, caused the wine to shake while it was open. It's considered that it makes the wine here not. You can't drink it. You could sell it, but you can't drink it. It's considered as koach. It's a special. It's also a decree by the sages. Yeah.
You said a lot of, as long as the vodka is domestic, it's okay. I see a lot of people drinking Russian vodka that,
So again, I said that if it doesn't say on a lactose, whey, these type of words, or grapes, then you could assume, technically, that it's not made that way based on the Ramah. Technically, you're right. They should use with a hechsher. Now, they have these lists. Those people that wrote those lists did look into it and made sure that it's not made from those products. And now we see a whole range of hashgachot giving kashrut to these bottles. By the way, sometimes it doesn't say hashgacha on it, but it is certified by a company. Sometimes the non-Jews don't want to have a hashgacha on the product for certain reasons they don't want. But it could be kosher anyway. Sometimes you have to find out. Yeah.
Vodka made from grapes, for example. You said if it has no flavor, it obviously nullifies, in a sense, the beverage.
Distillation.
So how come, even though it's made from grapes, you don't taste the grape at all? There is no grape factor to it. It's vodka. So why is it a problem?
It's an excellent question. And the Rivash and other poskim speak about it, the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah as well, and they say that since it was derived and made from that product, we still consider it forbidden because that's the source of it. Even though it doesn't have a taste, that was the source. There's a question about cognac and brandy. What bracha do you say on it? Shakol or hagefen? It is a question. And the poskim go back and forth, and they say that the practice today is to say shakol. But what is made from grapes? But it doesn't taste like grape juice, doesn't taste like wine, you know. And the answer is that since it was made from that, maybe you should say hagefen, and there are some poskim that hold you should say hagefen. The Har Tzvi speaks about it in depth, but the practice among most communities, which the Rav Ovadia speaks about it, he says the practice is shakol, because that's what the source was made from. It's a very good question. Anybody else? Yes,
I'm
please.
just curious, woman and wine, like a woman allowed to make a wine, or like it has something restriction? I'm just.
Women can make wine as long as they're religious and there's no questions of, you can make wine. As long as you're Jewish, and you're religious. Yeah.
One last thing, can you explain a little bit more in depth about what you were talking about with the sherry? What's it called?
Sherry casks.
Sherry, yeah. So what's the difference basically if it's absorbed in the wool? You were saying 1/6 or 1/60. That's nothing in there. Like it was washed out basically. So why is there any shaykhs from the?
Normally we say after 24 hours, whatever is inside the walls are considered a negative taste to any product. Okay? Now the Shulchan Aruch says that when it comes to alcoholic beverages, that rule doesn't apply. It would have to wait 12 months. We say after 12 months, everything is considered negative.
So even in that case though, it's not 1/60th of a flavor enhancer.
What do you mean?
Meaning to say that it's less than 1/60th. If you take something not kosher, you put it into a kosher dish. If it's 1/60th, you're still allowed to eat it.
Yes.
So the flavor that's coming from the walls, does it have 1/60th of an effect on the alcohol?
So we said also another issue. The issue is how much do we assess? Do we assess the thinnest layer or the thickest layer? If it's the thinnest layer, it's always void, and it's not even a question. But if we assess the whole barrel, now imagine the barrel is huge, and the thickness of the barrel is about 1 inch. It won't be enough. Even for 1/6, it wouldn't be enough maybe.
So it has too much of an effect on the alcohol.
So it depends how much of an effect it has. So there are reasons to be lenient and say that it only goes to the thinnest layer, and it definitely is batel. It's definitely void, 1/6 or 1/60th even. Yeah, behind him.
Some bourbons are made in barrels with molasses that's burnt inside, right? They like put a flame inside or something like that. Does the molasses have to be kosher or?
Molasses is kosher. Molasses in rum is actually made from molasses. It's sugar. Yeah, it is. Molasses is usually kosher. It's not a problem. Molasses is not a problem. Some want to say about charred barrels. Are charred barrels considered koshering? So technically it could be, but when you try to kosher the barrel, it could ruin it. So not everybody wants to do that.
Is every wine or every liquor that's made in Israel kosher? Or
No.
no?
It's not. It depends if it's a religious winery. I want to tell you like this. There's only 3 places in the world, as of now, maybe there's more. I mean, this is last time I checked, 2-3 years ago, that actually are owned by religious Jews. The whole winery. The rest is actually you have a run, meaning that a group of Hasidim come. They make their run, they pick their grapes, they make a run, and they leave a non-kosher facility. They kosher and they do whatever it takes. The only ones that I know of, is the Herzog family and Kedem. These are the 2 main ones that are kosher and owned.
Does not?
Manischewitz, I don't know. I don't think so, but I'm not sure. I don't think so. Anyone else?
They use fillers for tax purposes. They fill the Scotch or whiskey with something else.
Okay, so they use something called off-standard wine. What happens is, it's a good point, I didn't bring this up. What happens is like this. Whiskey, blended, let's say you want to ship it from one place to another place, you have to pay taxes through customs. And taxes for whiskey is very expensive. taxes for wine is cheaper. So the rule is, right? If you have some wine in there, right, it's considered a wine tax instead of a whiskey tax. So what they do is they put some wine inside whiskey. Now it is batel. It's less than, I think it's about 0.5%, 1%. It is batel. But if it gives taste to the product, it could be a problem because it's considered like a flavoring. But most people do not do it for the wine experts don't want to ruin their whiskey. They feel that if they put wine in there, eventually it will ruin the whiskey. So we assume that it's not a problem. It is batel and it's not a problem.
1%?
About 1%, a little bit less.
And that makes a big difference with tax?
Yeah. 2.5%, they make a difference, yeah. Yeah, up to 2.5%. You could, yeah, what?
How about the gold tequila? Is that
This is gold. Tequila?
No,
Yeah.
tequila.
Oh, gold. I said silver is recommended.
but gold doesn't have any flavor in it, but it's still the same?
It could be put in sherry casks.
All right.
Any other questions? You could ask me something else. If you want, you could ask me in 5 more minutes. Yeah.
Are there any halachic ramifications for alcohol on Pesach?
Oh, thank you. It's like a very important, I forgot to speak about it. Okay. A couple of years ago, this is the one, bourbon and rye also, but it's not here. Bourbon, okay. A couple of years ago, right before, I think it was right after Pesach, I think right after Pesach, April time, about 2 years ago, they found out that one of the main distributors in Kentucky, right, the middleman that sells all the alcoholic beverages, right, he's Jewish, and he's not religious, and he does not sell his stuff for Pesach. So that basically there was a whole list of bourbons and ryes that passed chametz on Pesach, and it's a big problem. You can't use it. And I remember I was in I'm not going to mention the hashgacha, I was in a certain company, certain hashgacha, and with the rabbanim there, and they had a meeting about this topic. And they wanted to permit all the alcoholic companies and all the liquor stores to sell their products, even though they already have these bottles. What are they supposed to throw in the garbage? Right? And it's Isser D'Rabbanan. So Rebelsky was very against it. Rebelsky did not want to permit it. There were the Rabbanim from other places that wanted to be more lenient. I don't know if they retracted. Some of them, I heard that maybe he retracted the Rav that permitted it. I'm not sure. But, well, that was a couple of years ago. I don't know. I don't think people still have it. But today you have to be very careful when you buy bourbon and rye, that it's not bought from a Jew. If it's bought from a Jew, you have a problem. Then maybe he didn't sell his chametz for Pesach. When you go to a liquor store, you should find out where he bought it from, and if it's being sold for Pesach. It's a very important point. I forgot to mention. It's a good thing that I was reminded. I wrote it in the handouts. It's in the papers also. Any other questions?
You have to
What
ask.
about vodka made from wheat?
Right, that is a problem, and it has to be sold as well. That is a problem. The ones that you're buying for Pesach is made out of potato, right? So that's not a problem. So you have to be careful, right?
Yeah.
You're supposed to sell your whiskey for Pesach, usually.
You have to assume that the owner, you have to be concerned that the liquor store owner is Jewish.
You have to ask, yeah. You can't just rely then probably, he's Jewish.
Most people are not Jewish, so why should I assume that the liquor owner?
When you go to a store and you see a liquor owner and he's in front of you, obviously since you could ask him, you ask him if he's Jewish and if he sells his stuff for Pesach. If what happened before all that, okay, that's not really possible from you, but from at least the hashgachot that are dealing with these products and they're vouching for it. And it's interesting, this hashgacha told me, now you know why this hashgacha does not make a kosher list for liquor and alcohol. So he tells me, now you know why. Look what happened. People were drinking for years and years and years bourbon and rye, which were past Pesach, and it was not sold, and it was chametz, issue. So, okay.